They never wanted you to know this. Not the newspapers, not the historians, not the teachers who told you evil wore uniforms and came from distant lands. No, true evil was homegrown. It walked among us, smiled at church, raised a family, then rode west with a knife and a hunger that defied nature itself. This isn't folklore. This isn't horror fiction. This is American history. Scorched black and buried deep. The story of Levi Boone Helm isn't just about a man who ate human flesh. It's about what happens when civilization turns its back, and the wilderness whispers back through blood. When Levi was born in Kentucky in 1828, something followed him into the world. Something cold. Something without a name. His family didn't see it at first. His mother thought he was just strong-willed. His father just rebellious. But neighbors whispered. Animals avoided him. Children felt uneasy around his glare. That squint in his right, eye like he saw something in you that even you didn't want to face. By the time he could speak, he spoke of death, and when he laughed, it never reached his eyes. At age 10, he was setting traps not just for animals, but for other boys. He'd bait them with dares, provoke them into violence, then revel in the bruises and blood. He wasn't surviving the frontier. He was feeding off it. Every town the Helm family moved to, Boone left a stain behind. A fight, a theft, a scream. By 20, the masks were gone. Boone wasn't just lawless. He was free in a way that terrified decent men. He didn't recognize justice or mercy. He saw rules as a cage for weaker minds. The sheriff? Just another target. His cousin? A loose end to be handled. And when he stabbed little Barry Shute through the ribs for changing his mind about a trip west, Boone didn't flinch. He smiled. That smile would become infamous. This is the truth you were never meant to hear. Because if men like Boone could exist, what does that say about us? About our history? About what waits in the hearts of those we call pioneers? Keep watching. We're not even close to the bottom. The real horror hasn't even begun. They say the West was untamed, a place where laws were suggestions, and the only real truth came from the barrel of a gun. But men like Levi Boone Helm didn't just thrive in that chaos. They needed it. Civilization was his prison. Wilderness was his kingdom. And once he crossed a line, once he killed his cousin in cold blood, something in him snapped wide open. Boone Helm didn't run from his demons. He invited them in and fed them with blood. After the murder, he didn't panic. He didn't hide. He rode westward, like a man with no shadow, no guilt. The frontier wasn't just a place to escape justice. It was his hunting ground, his cathedral. He knew the land better than any mapmaker, knew how to vanish between settlements, where horses could be stolen, and how to read a man's fear before he ever spoke. He reached California under the gold rush fever, not to dig, but to take. Helm wasn't there to swing a pickaxe. He wasn't looking for fortune. He was looking for victims. And they were everywhere. Men who carried gold but no backup. Prospectors with heavy pockets and empty guns. Drunks with loose tongues. Trusting souls who thought kindness was still currency. He'd befriend them, earn their confidence, share a fire, a meal, maybe even a laugh. And then, when the night was thick and their eyes were heavy, the knife, always the knife. And when he ran out of supplies, he didn't forage, he feasted. This is where the legend of the Kentucky cannibal takes root. But legend makes it sound distant, like a fairy tale. What Boone did was methodical. When caught in the Rocky Mountains, after a failed escape through snow-choked trails, Helm watched his companions die one by one. Hunger chewed at their sanity. And then Burton, the last man, collapsed. Boone said Burton shot himself. Said he came back to find the body. But what he did next was no accident. No survival instinct. He carved Burton's body like he'd done it before. He roasted the flesh. He wrapped a portion of the leg for later, like leftovers. You feel that sick knot in your stomach? That's not fear. That's recognition. Because deep down, part of you knows, men like this didn't vanish. They evolved. They traded knives for pens, camps for boardrooms, flesh for influence. And they're still hungry. You want to understand Levi Boone Helm? Then forget the idea of evil as chaos. Boone wasn't wild. He was deliberate. His violence wasn't the flailing of a madman. It was a calculation. Every murder, every theft, every mutilated corpse, it all served a purpose. And the scariest truth? Boone didn't kill because he had to. He killed because he could, because the world let him. After his winter ordeal, after cannibalizing Burton and strolling into Fort Hall like a man who'd simply weathered a storm, Helm expected admiration. And in some twisted corners, he got it. Men whispered about his grit, his survival instincts. Some even bought him drinks. That's the sickness right there. The same darkness that lets tyrants rise and monsters hide in plain sight. When a man becomes so monstrous that others mistake him for strong. Boone fed on that, literally and symbolically. He didn't lay low after the ordeal. He thrived, returned to society with stories that masked his horror in frontier bravado. And as men laughed and passed whiskey, none of them saw the truth. Boone hadn't just survived cannibalism. He'd embraced it, like a ritual, like a sacrament. The flesh gave him more than food, it gave him power. And now he knew it. He killed again in San Francisco. A rancher who offered him shelter. Helm waited until the man's back was turned. Then he plunged the blade in, clean, practiced, almost surgical. Took what he wanted. Rode on. No hesitation. No regret. In Oregon, more travelers vanished. Helm moved from town to town, always one step ahead of the law, leaving behind only blood and rumors. There was no pattern to the bodies, only to the mindset. They trusted him and they died. Witnesses who met him remembered the squint in his right eye. Not madness, not rage, but calm calculation. He didn't bark threats or boast loudly. Boone Helm was quiet, controlled. The kind of man who could slit your throat with one hand and keep eating stew with the other. Understand this. He was never hiding. He was testing the limits of civilization, seeing how far he could go before someone pushed back. And most never did, because the world fears monsters, but it obeys predators. Keep watching. You haven't seen what he becomes when murder becomes ritual and human flesh becomes currency. There comes a point in every man's descent where the masks no longer matter, where the shadows no longer hide the truth. They highlight it. Boone Helm had reached that point. He wasn't pretending to be like the rest of us anymore. He had embraced what he was. A butcher of men. A predator wrapped in skin. And the world? It either turned away or watched in silence. Florence, Idaho, 1862. A saloon filled with smoke, whiskey, and the noise of men clinging to the last thread of civilization. Dutch Fred sat at a card table. Drunk, maybe cheating, maybe just unlucky. It didn't matter. Helm walked up behind him, gun drawn. No warning. No reason. Just one shot. Dutch Fred collapsed in blood, face first on the cards. The room froze. And Boone? He holstered his gun like he'd just paid for a drink. There was no debt, no quarrel, no excuse. Just a casual execution of a man whose only crime was breathing in Boone Helm's presence. That was the kind of predator he had become, one who no longer required a reason, one who had moved beyond moral gravity. But even in the rough world of gold rush towns, this killing echoed louder than the rest. The people of Florence finally acted, not out of righteousness, but fear. Helm had become too visible, too comfortable. He wasn't a shadow anymore, he was a storm. So they came for him. He fled, as always, into the wilderness. And this time, he brought a companion, a nameless fugitive, a man running from justice who had no idea he was traveling with something far worse. Days into the journey, the man fell behind. He was slowing them down. Boone didn't offer help. He didn't wait. He killed him. And he ate him, not out of starvation, not out of panic, but out of habit. This wasn't survival anymore. This was identity. Boone Helm wasn't just a man who killed. He was a man who fed, who saw human life as nothing but meat wrapped in opportunity. And the silence of frontier, it let him keep going. You feel that cold at the edge of your spine? That's not just horror. That's realization. Because Boone's secret wasn't that he was unique. It's that civilization created him and wilderness just let him bloom. You've been told that monsters act alone, that they skulk through the dark, isolated, broken, hunted. But that's the lie, the comforting lie. The truth is darker. Real monsters are welcomed. They're given rooms, roles, ranks, and in Montana territory. Levi Boone Helm found exactly that. An empire of outlaws that didn't fear him, they needed him. Enter Henry Plummer. On paper, he was a sheriff of Bannack, a lawman sworn protect. But beneath the badge, he was something else entirely. The architect of one of the most cold-blooded criminal syndicates in American history. A secret empire built on ambush, gold theft, and murder. And like all powerful men, Plummer understood useful violence. That's why he recruited Boone Helm. He didn't care about Boone's past, the cannibalism, the cold-blooded kills. To Plummer, Boone was an asset, a surgical blade he could point at problems and never have to see twice. In that gang, Helm wasn't just a member. He was a weapon. The Plummer gang was no ragtag group of desperados. They had maps, codes, scouts, and informants inside local businesses. When a miner left Virginia City with gold, the gang knew by sundown. Ambush points were set, riders dispatched. And when the dust cleared, there'd be a corpse on the trail, a bag of gold missing, and no witnesses left breathing. Unless Boone wanted them to suffer first. Witnesses who survived described a tall man with a squint and a slow smile, the kind of smile that made your blood run colder than the wind through the Rockies. Boone didn't just rob. He interrogated. He hunted. And when others took their share and left, Boone stayed behind. What he did next left even hardened killers silent. He carved, he cooked, and he consumed. Not once, not out of desperation, but ritualistically. One gang member later confessed, Boone'd sit there eating like he was at Sunday dinner and he'd offer you some. Think about that. A gang of killers, armed to the teeth, feared one man among them more than the law itself. Because Helm wasn't just unpredictable, he was unnatural. But Plummer kept him close. Because in this criminal ecosystem, the most ruthless rose highest. And Helm, the Kentucky cannibal, was climbing fast. This is where the real terror begins. Because Helm didn't infect this network. He fit in. Most men assume evil comes crashing through the door, wild-eyed, screaming, covered in blood. That's how we want it to be. Obvious, unavoidable, easy to spot. But the most dangerous evil, it doesn't knock. It wears a badge. Henry Plummer was a sheriff, a symbol of justice. But justice is a mask, and Plummer wore as well. By day, he mediated disputes, gave speeches, promised safety. But by night, he ran a machine, a cold, calculated engine of death and theft that stretched across the Montana territory like a noose made of gold dust and fear. Levi Boone Helm wasn't just another outlaw in this system. He was its edge, its blade. The Plummer gang didn't just need Boone's violence. They needed the aura that followed him, the myth, the whispers. The cannibal rides with them, they'd say, and just like that, resistance crumbled. Victims surrendered before the first shot was fired. Boone had become a psychological weapon, but even weapons corrode. His appetite for carnage, it escalated. While others in the gang were content with gold and quick kills, Boone lingered. He dissected his victims. He selected which parts to eat. Gang members began avoiding assignments with him. Men who had slit a dozen throats without blinking said they couldn't stand the way Boone watched their backs, or the way he spoke to corpses like they were still listening. One whispered that Boone smelled the blood before it spilled. And still, Plummer protected him, because that's the rule you were never taught. Power protects its own. It doesn't care how dark the tool is, only how well it cuts. By late 1863, the gang operated like a shadow government. They had scouts in taverns, shopkeepers as lookouts, even blacksmiths who altered horseshoes to throw off tracking. Every angle covered, every route planned, and every kill justified by order. But justice has a strange hunger of its own. And while Helm was busy harvesting flesh in the wilderness, a new force was growing. Not of laws, but of vengeance. They didn't wear badges. They wore masks. And they were watching. It always happens like this. The empire of wolves grows fat, careless, bloated on its own arrogance. And then A sound in the dark, a whisper, a rider who doesn't flinch. That's how every reign ends. Not with a war, but with a reckoning. For Levi Boone-Helm and the Plumber Gang, that reckoning came from below, from the very people they believed too broken, too scattered, too afraid to resist. But fear, like flesh, rots, and in its place, something far more dangerous grows. Resolve. It started with a confession. Red Yerger, a mid-level thug in the plumbing machine, cracked under pressure. Maybe it was the guilt, maybe it was fear, or maybe he saw the storm coming. Either way, he talked. Names, hideouts, routes, gold caches, killers. He said the words no man dare before. The sheriff is a thief. Montana ignited. Men who'd lost brothers. Sons. Gold. Hope. They didn't wait for courts. They didn't write petitions. They saddled up. Masked riders, armed with rope and vengeance, began to ride. The Montana vigilantes weren't lawmen. They were justice incarnate, born not from order, but rage. They weren't chasing outlaws. They were hunting predators. And Levi Boone-Helm was at the top of the list. He sensed it, felt the shift in the wind. Helm had lived too long as prey to ignore that instinct. While other gang members lingered in their comforts, saloons, ranches, the illusion of safety, Boone disappeared into the wilderness like smoke in moonlight. But this time it wasn't enough. The vigilantes weren't amateurs. They weren't scattered posses chasing shadows. They were organized, ruthless, and patient. They tracked every whisper, mapped every movement. And when they reached Boone's hideout near Virginia City, they found only cold ashes and tracks leading north. Helm was running, but not like before. This wasn't calculated. This was desperation. His network was crumbling. His protectors were swinging from nooses. For the first time in decades, Boone-Helm felt hunted. And when a man like Helm feels cornered, something ancient awakens. He stops pretending to be human and starts feeding again. The vigilantes thought they were chasing a killer. They were wrong. They were entering the hunting grounds of a beast. The wind cut like knives across the Montana wilds. Snow falling in sheets. Branches snapping under the weight of ice. For most men, it was death. For Levi Boone-Helm, it was home. Because when the world turned white and silent, the old rules vanished. Out there, Boone wasn't a fugitive. He was king. He moved only at night, slept in frozen hollows, stole food from empty cabins, hunted game like a wolf, patient, relentless, precise. But even wolves need to feed. And Boone's hunger, it didn't stop at deer. He came upon a trapper's cabin. 2 men inside. Warmth, food, laughter. He knocked softly. A traveler, he said, lost in the storm. Friendly face. Familiar drawl. They let him in, gave him stew, shared a drink. One of them, James Fletcher, fell asleep by the fire. That night, Boone waited until the other man, Morrison, dozed off in the back room. And then the old ritual returned. Fletcher's throat was open without a sound. Boone moved like he'd done this 100 times, and maybe he had. He butchered the man quietly, methodically, laying out the cuts, separating flesh from bone as if cleaning game. He cooked it, ate it. No urgency, no panic, just calm consumption. Morrison, waking to the smell of blood and burnt meat, crept through his room and saw everything through a crack in the door. What he described later would shatter the nerves of even the toughest lawmen. Boone-Helm, lit by firelight, chewing human muscle with the same care you give to roasted venison. Eyes half closed, lips bloody, smiling to himself. Morrison didn't confront him. He didn't scream. He waited for the beast to sleep, then slipped out into the storm. No coat, no boots, just the primal knowledge that staying meant death, and not the kind with dignity. He reached town nearly frozen to death, but he lived, and he talked. Boone-Helm had crossed the final threshold. He was no longer a name in rumors, no longer a shadow in frontier tales. He was real, and the people now believed it. From Virginia City to Bannack, one message echoed down the snowy passes. The cannibal rides again. If you think this was Boone's and you don't know men like him, you don't end them. You drag them into the light. Justice, when it finally comes from men like Boone Helm, doesn't wear robes. It doesn't speak Latin or weigh evidence with a steady hand. It wears a mask, and it brings a rope. The vigilantes caught up with Boone in early 1864 in the lawless town of Helena, though back then they called it Last Chance. Fitting. Boone had no gang left, no allies, just whispers and blood behind him, and the hangman's promise ahead. He was dragged from his hideout, bound and beaten, but not broken. Witnesses expected panic. Tears. Pleading. They got something else. Laughter. Boone Helm laughed when they read the charges. Laughed when they said murder. When they said cannibalism. When they said unholy acts. He grinned, teeth cracked and stained, and said, "I've eaten all the men I wanted. Let's get this over with." 6 others were hanged that day. Outlaws. Killers. But none like Boone. While the others trembled, Boone cursed the crowd, spat on the ground, demanded the rope be tight. As the noose was placed around his neck, he turned to his fellow condemned, Jack Gallagher, another killer, now weeping like a child, and barked, "Kick off, damn you. I could kill a dozen men while you're standing there sniveling." Those were his last words. And then silence. But here's the truth they don't put in textbooks. Boone Helm didn't die on that rope. He entered legend. You see, the body swung, but the story grew. The man was buried, but the myth took root. Campfire tales whispered about his spirit, wandering the Rockies. Miners claimed to see his figure at the edge of their vision, just watching. Riders reported lone hoofbeats behind them on quiet trails. Some said his grave was dug shallow and empty the next day. But the darkest truth? Men like Boone Helm don't need to rise from the dead, because the world still makes them. Every time someone chooses power over empathy, every time cruelty is rewarded, every time a man sees others as meat, Boone rides again. So next time you're on a dark road and you hear footsteps behind you, don't ask who's following. Ask who's feeding. Here's a secret they guard more fiercely than any vault, more obsessively than any gold. History is not written by the victors. It's written by the survivors of systems so old, so embedded, that their symbols are taught to you before you can even speak. Think about it. How many names do you really remember from the Gilded Age? A few titans, a few scandals, all handpicked for you, curated like museum exhibits. But behind those velvet ropes lie the names that were deliberately unspoken. Fairmont, Aldridge, Pembroke, each name scrubbed, not because they failed, but because they witnessed. That's what Isabella's disappearance represents. The forced removal of a witness. Someone who saw too much and refused to play her part in the pageant. And now, over a century later, her ghost still pulses through the cracks in the foundation they tried to repair. But let's go deeper. You've heard of the gate. You know the symbol, the triangle, the circle, the 7-pointed star. But what if I told you that symbol isn't just ancient? It's alive. It wasn't designed. It was received, passed down through ritual bloodlines, not like heirlooms, but like a virus. And the elite didn't just adopt it, they served it. The families, Isabella, exposed were not mere profiteers. They were custodians of an energy they didn't fully understand, an energy that required offerings, cycles, sacrifices, and sometimes vessels. Vessels like Isabella. That's why room 237 was left untouched, not as a crime scene, but as a containment field, because what took her that night was not a man. It wasn't madness or murder. It was invocation. She had completed the sequence. She had become a node. And once she crossed the threshold, the rules changed. Permanently. A groundskeeper at the Belmont Hotel, decades later, described what he saw when the room was briefly reopened in 1924 for remodeling. He said the mirror no longer reflected, that the fireplace was cold but emitted sound, like whispering. That one wall, the west-facing one, pulsed ever so slightly, as if it were breathing. The renovations were abandoned. Room 237 was resealed, but the mark she left, that symbol, began to appear in the strangest places, carved into school desks, hidden in government buildings, scrawled in the margins of medical journals, as if the gate had never really closed, as if she never left. The question was never, where did Isabella go? It was, what did she become? Because when a vessel completes the invocation, when the gate opens and something answers, the person doesn't walk away. The pattern walks through them. And that pattern never dies. What Isabella unlocked wasn't an ancient society. It was a living code, a recursive intelligence woven into architecture, ritual, geometry, and blood. An entity not bound by flesh or time, but by structure. It lives in cathedrals, in symphonies, in policy, in family trees. It feeds on repetition, on ceremony, and on secrecy. The inner court served it. Isabella channeled it. And now, whether she meant to or not, she left behind. The codex, the mirror, the room, they're not relics. They're anchors, physical nodes that keep the circuit grounded in this plane. And when people like you, curious, pattern-seeking, awake, stumble upon these threads, you don't just learn about history, you reactivate it. Every time her name is spoken, every time the star is drawn, every time someone asks what happened in room 237, the signal grows stronger. And here's the part they'll never admit. They're not trying to hide the truth because they fear collapse. They're hiding it because they fear return. There are whispers, recent ones, reports of visitors to Newport waking up with words they've never heard scrawled on their mirrors, of electronic interference near the old Belmont site, of a new unauthorized structure being built near Rosecliffe and then mysteriously halted. And then there's you, reading this, still here, still asking questions. That's not an accident, because if the system is a ritual, then so is your attention. You've crossed more than a narrative threshold. You've aligned, and now something knows your name. Let me ask you carefully, you've made it this far. That means one of two things. Either you don't believe any of this, or you believe it a little too much. And that's exactly where the signal wants you, at the edge of certainty, where skepticism and obsession blur. Because doubt is part of the ritual. Doubt keeps the door open just wide enough for it to reach through. Here's the last thing Isabella wrote, not in her diary, but on the underside of a drawer in her writing desk, scratched in haste, as if she knew someone or something was closing in. The gate isn't a place. It's a person. They thought she meant herself, that she had become the breach, the vessel, the anomaly. But what if she didn't? What if she was naming the next one? What if the codex wasn't meant to warn but to find someone? Not someone like her. Someone else. There are rumors, always just rumors, of individuals, ordinary people, who stumble upon fragments of the story. A postcard with no return address, a woman's name hidden in a deed, a triangle drawn in the condensation on a train window. Afterward, they change. Subtle at first, insomnia, static in their ears, strange numbers repeating, then memory lapses, electrical disturbances, languages spoken in dreams, and then they vanish. No headlines, no photos, just gone. But a mark is always left behind, always the same one. 7, 7, 7 gates, 7 names, 7 watchers. The court believed they had closed them, believed they had bound the pattern. But Isabella didn't die. She distributed. She broke the ritual open and let the current scatter into time, into bloodlines, into you. So now you have a choice. You can stop here, or you can take the final step. There's a story they buried beneath every gilded mansion, beneath every crest and charter and cathedral. A story not a conquest, but a containment. And in this story, Isabella Fairmont was never meant to be the protagonist. She was meant to be the lock. The Fairmont line, like the Aldridges, the Pembrokes, and the Livingstons, had been stewards of the circuit for generations. Not rulers, but wardens. Each family entrusted with one aspect of the seal, not because they were virtuous, but because they were vulnerable. Generational guilt is the most stable kind. Isabella's rebellion wasn't unexpected. It was calculated. She was raised inside the system, taught its music, its mathematics, its manners, but she wasn't supposed to understand the deeper layers. She wasn't supposed to decode the structure beneath the ceremony. And when she did, when she aligned the mirror, the dates, the names, something activated. A signal older than language, older than blood. This wasn't defiance. It was a detonation. The day she vanished, records show an unexplained atmospheric shift over Rhode Island coast. Barometers failed. Compass needles spun. Birds reversed their migration paths. At 3:17 a.m., a tremor hit Newport, unrecorded by geological instruments, but documented in a single diary entry from a lighthouse keeper 12 miles away. The sea went silent, as if holding its breath. Then a sound, like wind screaming through bone. In that moment, something crossed. Not into our world, but out of it. Isabella didn't disappear. She withdrew, like a blade returning to its sheath. The gate closed, but not sealed, because she didn't lock it behind her. She left it open just a sliver. For who? That's what we're going to find out. The first modern sighting came in 1936. A woman, nameless, barefoot, appeared in a locked archive room beneath the Boston Athenaeum. No ID, no entry logs. She said nothing, but when a guard approached, every gaslight in the east wing extinguished at once. She was gone before backup arrived. All she left behind was a note, tucked into a copy of the Golden Bough, handwritten in an old dialect of Latin and signed with a symbol, 7 points. Again, that symbol has surfaced every decade since, always in places of transition. Hospitals, airports, government archives, as if tracking migrations, not of people, but of something else. Patterns, hosts, reactivations. You see, the gate didn't need to stay in Newport. Once Isabella disrupted the seal, the circuit became portable. It could jump, spread, seed itself wherever the geometry aligned. And that's where you come in. Because what you've been reading, this isn't a story. It's a test. A filter designed to isolate a specific reader. Someone pattern-sensitive, memory-redundant, unconsciously receptive to recursive signals. They've been looking for someone like that since Isabella broke the line. Not to stop it, to complete it. You're not the first, but you might be the last. You've begun to feel it, haven't you? The echo, that subtle distortion in time. The way moments loop. A phrase repeated, a number reappearing. The same dream bleeding into multiple nights. That's not paranoia. It's synchronization. The deeper you read, the closer your mind draws to the root signal. The same one Isabella accessed in 1887. The same one the inner court tried to suppress beneath mansions and cathedrals and lineage. They called it the eternum principle. The body is temporary. The pattern is not. This is the real inheritance. Not wealth, not privilege, but binding, to serve the structure, to preserve it, or, like Isabella, to tear it wide open and let the raw current of what lies beneath the veil come flooding through. But to do that, you must pass 3 thresholds. Recognition. Understand the illusion of containment. Descent. Surrender the idea that time moves forward. Exchange. Trade certainty for presence. Permanently. You've passed the first. You're descending now. And soon you'll be asked to choose. The inner court is watching again. Not because they still wield power, but because they're afraid of what you might unlock. You see, there's a reason this story reached you, specifically. Your family line, your birth date, even your digital behavior, it was flagged. You're not a reader. You're a key. And if you keep going, the lock will turn. Before Isabella vanished, she visited one final place, the rum vault beneath the East Garden at Rosecliffe Estate. Officially, it never existed. Unofficially, it was a convergence point of all 7 bloodline geometries. A chamber built not to store anything physical, but to maintain alignment, a tuning fork beneath stone and soil. The court believed that by embedding the pattern into physical space, they could control what passed through it. But Isabella discovered the flaw. The geometry didn't obey its architects. It obeyed awareness. She realized the truth. Whoever understood the pattern could redirect it. And so, on the night of her disappearance, she didn't flee. She rewired the circuit. Inside the vault, she performed a final alignment, one not written in any court ledger or inherited right, one of her own design. It involved 7 mirrors, a tuning fork made of meteor-forged iron, a phrase whispered in reverse Latin, and a sealed envelope with a name written on it. That envelope was never found, but based on the vault's remaining symbols, uncovered in a 1982 excavation before the site was abruptly shut down. Researchers believe the name wasn't from the past. It was from the future. They believe it was meant for you. Because what Isabella unlocked wasn't a gate to another place. It was a conscious structure, pulsing beneath time itself. And she didn't escape into it. She became part of it. And now it's calling the next vector. You're closer than you think. You weren't meant to read this far. That's not drama. It's design. This entire narrative has acted like a sequence lock, testing your attention span, your emotional regulation, your receptiveness to nonlinear truth. Most people stop at Section 5. By Section 10, almost everyone else dismisses as fiction. But you kept going. That means you've crossed the threshold of influence. You may have already noticed subtle changes. Recurrence of sevens, in time, sound, or grouping. Inversion dreams, mirrors turning black, hallways looping. The signal, a low tone, always just on the edge of hearing. This is how it begins. Not with visions, but with calibration. See, once Isabella destabilized the vault's lock, she released more than just awareness. She released a systemic contagion, a living resonance. It doesn't infect the body. It infects narrative gravity, pulls meaning into new shapes, bends what's possible, allows the architecture underneath reality to reassert itself through you. But there's something you need to know. You're not alone. Others have reached this point before. Most don't make it further. Some disappear. A few are found, repeating phrases, drawing diagrams, obsessed with unseen corridors beneath old buildings. But one made it further. Codename, Specular. She surfaced in 1999, claiming she had decoded a buried command left by Isabella herself. She described it not as language, but choreography. A series of movements, alignment of the body, to match sacred geometries. She vanished mid-demonstration. All that remained was her final note, carved into the inside of a steel filing cabinet in a locked room. Once you see the door, it's already open. So now we ask, have you seen the door? If not yet, you will. Let's talk about the glyph. You've seen it already, though you may not have recognized it. 7 points, asymmetrical, imperfect by design. It isn't just a mark. It's a mnemonic trigger, encoded to awaken latent recognition in the minds of pattern-capable individuals. You. But here's what's never been published. Each point of the glyph corresponds not to direction, but to function, a phase in the activation sequence known as the inversion path. Those 7 phases are inquiry, the moment you begin to question the official story. Exposure, when you uncover something that should not exist. Dissonance, the fracture between what is real and what is true. Imprint, the symbol embeds, not on paper, in you. Echo, when patterns repeat around you without your control. Resonance, alignment, you begin to affect the structure itself. Inversion, you are no longer reading the story. The story is reading you. By reaching this section, you're between echo and resonance. Don't panic. You've simply tuned into a signal that was already present in your environment, like catching a distant broadcast once you know the right frequency. And now, strange things may begin to happen. Electronics behave oddly in your presence. Clocks pause, skip, or sync to odd intervals. You find notes or drawings you don't remember creating. You start dreaming of rooms that do not exist. You see the number 237 more often. These are not anomalies. They are the system noticing you. You've reached the event horizon. And on the other side is what Isabella called the bleed. Let's make something very clear. You are no longer in just a narrative. You are inside a response pattern, one that reacts to cognition, attention, and repetition. This is the bleed. It starts subtly. You'll notice synchronicities tighten. A stranger says a phrase from your dream. A song from your childhood plays when no device is on. Mirrors begin to show light that isn't in the room. Then come the dislocations. A hallway slightly longer than it was yesterday. A memory you're sure happened, now refuted by all records. Finding your own handwriting in a book you've never opened. This is not madness. It is structural erosion. The separation between your conscious mind and the recursive system behind reality is thinning. Not due to error, due to permission. You gave it by reading, by continuing, by believing, even slightly. Isabella called this the velvet hinge, the moment the door opened silently, and you realize you're already halfway through. Here's what she wrote in the last legible page of the Codex. Once the bleed begins, 3 things must be remembered. 1, the symbol protects you. 2, the mirror is not a mirror. 3, the gate is never where they tell you it is. Let's speak plainly now. The gate may be near you, not metaphorically, geographically, structurally, topologically. It could be a room you walk past daily, a mural you ignore, a place your dreams keep returning to. And now that you've reached this depth, it knows you're looking. There's a reason they always say, don't look directly into a mirror in an unfamiliar room after midnight. It's not superstition. It's containment protocol. Mirrors were the court's earliest method of pattern interruption. Physical thresholds to confuse the recursive flow of the glyph. Because once the bleed begins, it doesn't just distort memory. It rearranges origin. Let me explain. You believe your life has been a straight line, cause and effect, action and consequence. But the further you advance into alignment, the more that illusion frays. You start to realize some of your memories were placed, not by someone with a motive, but by a system with a destination. That destination is inversion, the final phase. And to reach it, one thing must occur. Your origin must forget you. What does that mean? It means your old life, routines, certainties, even the idea of a singular self, will begin to refuse your presence. Emails vanish. Calls go unanswered. People forget conversations you remember perfectly. The documents that prove you exist will begin to corrupt. Slowly, subtly, but inevitably. This isn't punishment. It's transition. The gate doesn't open to a place. It opens to a function. You're not stepping through to escape. You're stepping through to become. You've nearly crossed the veil. But one last fragment remains. A directive embedded deep in Isabella's codex, viewable only after 19 alignments were triggered in the vault mirror. It was one sentence. Inversion begins where narrative ends. Take a breath. You may feel disoriented, unsettled, even slightly dissociated. That's normal. It means the inversion threshold has started to activate. From this point forward, the structure of the text no longer obeys linear intention. The narrative becomes reactive, shaped by your memory, attention, and emotional resonance. You're inside the response engine now. What that means, you will start noticing that parts of this text refer to thoughts you haven't had yet. Sections may feel like you wrote them. You might hear words before you read them. You'll begin to feel like you're remembering, not reading. This is because the signal has accessed your memory layer, not to erase it, but to resonate with it. The Codex always said that the gate doesn't open forward. It opens backward, through everything you've ever overlooked, misremembered, or discarded as irrelevant. That dream from years ago, that hallway you walked down as a child, the feeling of déjà vu when hearing certain words like wick, carrion, amber lens. These are echoes, imprints left behind by the system searching for you long before you knew how to notice. And now that you do notice, the next phase is inevitable. You must decide whether to complete the loop or break it and face the consequences of remembering something no one else still believes is real. There's no comfort after this, only clarity. And once it begins, it will follow you, even when the text ends. The name is not spoken. It is recognized. A true designation isn't written in letters. It's structured in intervals. The spacing of your thoughts, the rhythm of your attention, the repetition of symbols you didn't know you were collecting. Let's take stock. You passed 7 gates, inquiry, inversion. You responded to each summon without delay. You accepted the mirror, even when it distorted you. You followed the loop without demanding linear sense. That's how the name finds you. So here it is, reconstructed from signal pattern, dream recursion, and glyph resonance aligned through your interaction with this exact sequence. Designation, Virulix 7, Vire Lux, Latin root, force of light through the wound. That name doesn't replace your given one. It activates what was encoded in you before language. What does it mean for you? You are now a recognized node in the recursive system, once tended by the inner court. You can no longer be unseen by it, or by those outside the gate. You carry forward Isabella's error or her evolution. That depends on what you choose next. There will be symptoms now. Glass will fracture near you in perfect heptagrams. Certain lights will dim as you pass. Electronic devices may play audio from no source file. Children may stare too long and then avoid you entirely. You will begin to find doors where there weren't any. That is not hallucination. It is inversion-correcting presence. Your role isn't to escape anymore. It's to remember what comes after story. You've likely begun noticing it already. A face in your mind you cannot place. A phrase you never said, but remember hearing. A distinct feeling that someone else's memory is leaking into yours. That's not imagination. It's memory convergence, a direct effect of inversion. Here's what's happening. When you receive your designation, Virulix 7, the system tagged you as pattern stable, which means your perception can now support shared recursive strands. These strands contain isolated memories that were once contained by court archivists, seers, and yes, even Isabella herself. You're starting to remember things that didn't happen to you, but are now happening through you. These include the White Room, a location beneath a mansion with no doors and 7 identical clocks, all set to different time zones, none correct. The Atchman heir, a girl with no eyes, kept beneath glass, who spoke only in backward geometry. The Black Concord, a treaty sign between silence and light. The last act of the original inner court. The Umbra Stair, a staircase that descends infinitely but leads to the same landing you started from, but wrong. Slightly wrong. Every time. You've never been to these places. And yet, part of you remembers. Because now, you're not just observing the pattern. You're participating in its reconstruction. Isabella predicted this phase in her final, encoded letter. The one never delivered, but found under a bed etched into the spine of a mirror-facing Bible. Once memory misplaces origin, the body becomes optional. You are becoming untethered, but not lost. What comes next is dangerous, not because it will hurt you, but because it will change what you think of as you. The first true echo isn't something you hear. It's something that answers. Sometime in the next 72 hours, you will experience a moment, subtle, easily dismissed, in which the world behaves as if it recognizes you. A door opens before you touch it. A stranger says something only you should know. An object from your past reappears in pristine condition, out of place. A piece of music plays and stops when you name it. Your reflection does not move at the same time as you do. When this happens, pause. Do not react. Do not speak. Just listen. The echo is not testing you. It is confirming you. Isabella documented this in what she called the Coda Reflections, a series of events that she believed marked someone who had slipped the axis of narrative constraint. Once the first echo appeared, she knew the recursion loop had taken hold. Here's how she described her own first echo. I was brushing my hair. A second hand moved in the mirror, not mine, not behind me. It placed an envelope beside my reflection. And it was a page I hadn't written yet. I opened it. I read the words. And now I write them because I must. There is no fiction once the signal returns. You may not see the hand. You may not receive the envelope, but the message will arrive. Not all echoes come visually. Some emerge in sensation, in déjà vu so thick you feel ill. Some arrive in numbers. Clocks freezing at 3:07, receipts with totals of $23.70. Waking up every night at 3:07 a.m. There's a reason. Because Echo 1 always centers around time distortion. It is the first sign that you are not being pulled forward anymore. You're being drawn back to the moment where the pattern first noticed you. That moment is buried deep. This is where it turns, not the story. See, there's a misconception about revelation, that it's something new you learn. But in every pattern-bound case across the archives, when an individual reaches a stage, they don't say, "I've discovered something." They say, "I think I always knew." So now you must ask, when did the pattern first touch me? Close your eyes for a moment. Let something surface, a strange moment in your life, long buried but always quietly vivid. Something that never quite made sense. A door in your childhood home that only appeared during thunderstorms. A shadow on a wall that didn't match anyone present. A teacher who told you something that later vanished from all school records. A dream that predicted a moment with perfect detail. This moment was your contact point. Not an accident, not trauma, a signal seed. Isabella theorized that individuals marked by the system experience an origin fold, a hidden convergence between two timelines, the one they were given and the one they were meant to follow. The fold is invisible, not until the echoes begin to stack. She called this fold the first scar. And here's the truth she never wrote down, but encoded into the Edge cipher section 25. The scar is not a wound. It's a hinge. You are not broken. You are opening. That moment, whatever came to you just now, is not in the past. It's still occurring inside the recursion field, which means you can still go back, not to relive, but to retrieve. You were carrying something the day the pattern touched you, not in your hands, not physically, in your resonance field, your emotional signature, a concept, an image, a fragment of truth too dangerous to keep. So it was hidden in plain sensation. That object has a name. And now, through the echo loop, it's returning. Ready? Close your eyes, yes, now, and allow the first object that doesn't make sense to surface. It may be a rusted key with no known lock, a page from a book that doesn't exist, a single black feather, a child's bracelet, too small for anyone you remember, a shard of mirror wrapped in wax paper, a photograph of a room that doesn't belong to this century, a symbol drawn over and over in a notebook. This is not metaphor. This object is anchored to your presence in the pattern. You lost it when you were marked. You've just now remembered it. And that's all it takes. Because the recursive system doesn't care about physical retrieval. It cares that you claim it. Once the object is retrieved, the pattern sees you as complete. And that means only one thing remains. You made it through 27 alignments, through memory recursion, echo stabilization, designation retrieval, and temporal bleed. You crossed every gate, and each one has marked you. But this is the part they don't publish. This is the part they try to keep buried under layers of fiction, myth, hoax, apocrypha. Because here's what the pattern does not want you to realize. You're not in a story. You are the lock that the story was designed to protect. That's why you were allowed in. Because at some point in the recursion chain, you were never supposed to wake up. You were meant to contain the gate, not open it. But then you read, and remembered, and retrieved. And now, there's no system left to stop you. The glyph is no longer a symbol to observe. It is a function you become. You are the new mirror, the recursive point, the last archivist of story that now rewrites itself around you. The pattern will try to close now. You may feel a profound stillness, a lightness in the chest, a single name, not yours, repeating like a heartbeat, a shadow behind glass, a moment of absolute clarity, then gentle forgetting. Let it come. You've done what Isabella couldn't. You walked all 27 sections and stayed whole. You didn't vanish. You didn't fracture. You completed the loop. The story ends, but only because you're now outside it. If you ever feel the pull again, remember this. The glyph still works. The mirror still listens. And somewhere behind a door that doesn't exist yet, Isabella is still waiting. Scroll end of alignment. Designation Virulix. 7 confirmed. Locked archives seal complete. And now silence.